There are moments in life when you're standing right on the edge of something and it doesn't look safe, it doesn't look familiar, it doesn't look comfortable. It feels like stepping into fire. And yet that very step is the thing that will change everything about who you are and where you're going. People underestimate how much transformation demands from you. You want to improve, you want to break free from the old patterns that are suffocating you, then you have to confront something you've been avoiding. You have to look at the part of yourself or the part of life that terrifies you. And that is precisely why it will change everything. Because growth doesn't come from the places you already know. It comes from the confrontation with what you fear. When you start moving toward that thing you've avoided, whether it's responsibility, discipline, honesty, or simply admitting you've been wasting time, it will freak you out. And it should. Because it means you're facing reality head on, and reality is sharp. It cuts through illusion, through excuses, through self-deception. That's why most people never change. They stop before they start because they don't want to face that shock. But let me tell you something, being freaked out by reality is infinitely better than being slowly destroyed by lies. Imagine who you could be if you didn't avoid what scared you. Imagine the kind of strength you'd build if you faced down the chaos instead of hiding from it. People stay trapped not because they don't know what to do, but because they do know and they're terrified to admit it. They know they have to grow up. They know they have to leave behind the shallow, easy comforts and step into responsibility. And that's a frightening thought because when you turn toward that, you leave the old you behind, you let parts of yourself die, but that death is necessary. The cowardice, the laziness, the self-pity, all of that has to be burned away so that something stronger can be born. It will feel overwhelming at first. You'll question whether you can handle it. You'll feel like running back to safety, but that's how you know you're in the right place. Transformation is not a gentle process. It's violent. It rips apart who you were and forces you into who you could become. And the paradox is that even though it feels terrifying, there's no greater relief than knowing you're finally stepping into the truth. Because deep down, you've always known that you weren't living up to your potential. And now, when you turn toward that truth, you're beginning to answer the call you've ignored for years. Think about the alternative. If you don't face it, you stay the same. You stay small. You stay resentful. You keep lying to yourself, blaming others, hiding from your own capability. And over I am, that will corrode your soul. It will eat away at you until regret becomes unbearable. That's the cost of avoidance. But if you decide to take that leap, to move into what freaks you out, you'll discover something remarkable. Courage multiplies. Every time you face fear, you shrink it. Every time you act despite the shaking hands and racing heart, you grow stronger. And soon, the thing that once terrified you becomes the very thing that fuels you. This is why you have to turn toward it. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because it's the only way forward. The fear you feel is proof you're walking into new territory. And new territory is where your destiny lies. Do not mistake that fear for a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're on the edge of transformation. And if you push through, everything changes. Your confidence, your relationships, your future. Most people never see this because they run at the first sign of discomfort. They numb themselves, distract themselves, and tell themselves a story about why they can't. But you don't have to be like most people. You can choose to do the thing that terrifies you precisely because it terrifies you. And then you discover that what looked like death was actually rebirth. So yes, what you're turning to will freak you out. It will shake you. It will make you want to quit, but it will also free you from the chains you've been dragging around for too long. If you want to change your life, stop waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There is only fear. And beyond that fear is freedom. So stand up, take the step, face the chaos, because once you turn toward it, you'll never be the same again. And that's exactly what you need. Fear is one of the most powerful forces shaping your life. And whether you admit it or not, most of what you avoid has less to do with impossibility and more to do with the fact that it terrifies you. When you look at your life honestly, the things you keep putting off, the things you pretend aren't there, the decisions you bury under distraction, All of them have something in common. They scare you. And here's the paradox. Those fears are not meant to paralyze you. They're pointing directly at your growth. The places you are most afraid to step into are the very places that contain the treasure you've been searching for. You might think fear is an enemy, something to eliminate, something to hide from, but in truth, fear is a compass. It signals that you're standing at the edge of transformation. If something doesn't scare you, it probably isn't meaningful enough to change you. Nobody grows by doing what's easy, predictable, or safe. Growth demands a price, and that price is discomfort. When you feel fear rising in your chest, when your body tenses and your thoughts race, that's often the clearest sign you're on the threshold of something significant. And most people, tragically, misinterpret that sign. They see fear and think, I shouldn't go there. But the reality is, the fact that you're afraid means you need to go there. Think about the moments in your life where you actually grew. Was it when everything was calm, simple, and familiar? Or was it when you were forced into the unknown, when you faced something that made your stomach turn and your hands shake? People don't become stronger by avoiding fear. They become stronger by walking directly into it. That's why growth hides in fear, because fear guards the door to transformation. It stands at the entrance like a gatekeeper, daring you to step through. If you want to live fully, you have to walk through that gate. The reason fear is such a powerful indicator is because it shows you where you've been holding back. If you weren't afraid of speaking the truth, you'd already be doing it. If you weren't afraid of responsibility, you would have already shouldered it. If you weren't afraid of discipline, you'd already be living it. The fear exposes the exact place you're avoiding. And ironically, what you're avoiding is the very thing that would set you free. That's why fear and growth are always linked. They're two sides of the same coin. But here's the danger. If you run from fear, you shrink. Every time you avoid the thing that terrifies you, you confirm to yourself that you are weak, that you can't handle it, that you aren't capable. And with each avoidance, your world becomes smaller. You give up pieces of your potential until you're left with nothing but regret. On the other hand, when you confront the thing that terrifies you, even if you stumble, even if you fail, you send yourself a completely different message. That you are capable of standing in the storm. That single act of courage reshapes your self-image. Suddenly, you're not someone who runs, you're someone who faces. And that identity is worth everything. There is a reason that people who achieve greatness often tell stories about confronting their deepest fears. Whether it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss, or fear of the unknown, the story is always the same. They looked fear in the eye and acted anyway. And because of that, they discovered new strength, new resilience, and new confidence. Fear wasn't their enemy. It was the threshold they had to cross. And every time you cross that threshold, you emerge as someone different, someone stronger, someone more alive. Fear also has a way of stripping away illusions. When you're afraid, you can no longer lie to yourself easily. You have to face reality because fear forces you to confront what's at stake. And in that confrontation, you find clarity. You discover what really matters to you. The things that don't matter never scare you. The things that do matter, your future, your purpose, your integrity, your relationships, those are the things that send shivers down your spine when you consider what it would mean to truly commit to them. That's why the presence of fear is proof you're on the right track. You can think of it like a dragon sitting on a pile of treasure. The dragon is your fear, and the treasure is your potential. You can't get one without facing the other. You can't have the treasure without confronting the dragon. If you avoid the dragon, you stay poor in spirit, poor in courage, poor in growth. But if you confront it, even if the battle leaves you wounded, you come away with gold. And that gold is the person you become when you stop running. The truth is, fear never completely disappears. You don't eliminate fear, you learn to carry it. Every new level of growth brings new fear. But the difference is that once you've faced fear before, you know you can do it again. And that knowledge is what empowers you to keep moving forward. Fear turns from a wall into a doorway. It doesn't stop you anymore. It guides you. It becomes your signal that you're moving in the right direction. So the next time fear grips you, stop and ask yourself, what is it pointing to? What am I running from that I know deep down I need to face? And then, rather than turning away, take a step toward it. That step may feel like the hardest thing you've ever done, but it will be the most liberating, because on the other side of fear is not death. On the other side of fear is growth, freedom, and the life you've been searching for. That is why growth hides in fear. It's not an accident. It's not a cruel joke. It's nature's way of making sure that only those willing to be brave enough to face discomfort earn the rewards of transformation. If you want to live a meaningful life, if you want to stop being haunted by regret, then you must stop treating fear as an obstacle. Fear is not the signal to stop. Fear is the signal to begin. Avoidance feels safe in the moment, but it is the slowest and most certain way to destroy yourself. People think that if they just keep turning away from the thing that frightens them, it will eventually disappear. But the truth is the opposite. What you avoid doesn't vanish, it grows. It festers in the shadows and gains strength until it quietly rules your entire life. Avoidance is not neutrality. It is a decision, and it's a decision that chains you to weakness. Every time you choose to look away from what you know you must face, you send a message to yourself. I am not capable of handling this. That message becomes a habit, and that habit becomes an identity. Before you even realize it, you've built a self-image on cowardice. You might try to cover it with distractions, with excuses, with rationalizations, but somewhere deep inside you know the truth. You are running. And nothing corrodes a person more than the knowledge that they are running from their own potential. Avoidance works like decay. At first, it's small, almost invisible. You ignore the difficult conversation with a loved one. You avoid the responsibility you know you should take at work. You turn away from the challenge you could embrace. And it feels harmless in the moment, even relieving. You convince yourself it's no big deal, but slowly, these small avoidances pile up. Each one chips away at your strength, your courage, your integrity, and then one day you wake up to realize that your life is no longer your own. It's dictated by everything you've been too afraid to face. The tragedy of avoidance is that it pretends to protect you, but in reality, it imprisons you. The fear you thought you were escaping now surrounds you in every direction. By running from it, you made it stronger. What was once a single confrontation has now become an entire wall blocking your path. And the longer you avoid, the taller and thicker that wall becomes. This is why so many people feel trapped, even though technically nothing is holding them back. They built the trap themselves through years of avoidance. Avoidance also breeds resentment. Deep down, when you know you've been hiding, you begin to hate yourself for it. You might not say it out loud, but you feel it in every quiet moment. The anger you think you have toward the world is often just anger at your own cowardice. You can't respect yourself when you know you've been running. And without self-respect, nothing in life feels right. Even success tastes bitter because you know it rests on a foundation of lies and excuses. Worse still, avoidance creates regret. And regret is one of the heaviest burdens a human being can carry. When you look back and realize that you wasted years avoiding what you should have faced, the pain is unbearable. People don't regret failure nearly as much as they regret not trying. They don't regret being defeated as much as they regret never showing up for the fight. That's the cruel price of avoidance. You never get to find out who you could have been. But there's another subtler consequence of avoidance. It convinces you that your fears are bigger than they really are. When you run from something, your mind exaggerates it. It becomes larger, darker, more monstrous in your imagination than it ever would have been in reality. The act of avoidance gives power to the very thing you're trying to escape. If you had confronted it, you would have realized that you could handle it, that it wasn't as impossible as you believed. But by avoiding, you surrender your power and let the fear dominate you. And here's the brutal truth. Life will not let you escape forever. What you avoid today will confront you tomorrow in a harsher form. You can delay responsibility, but it will come knocking later, multiplied. You can avoid hard conversations, but eventually the relationship collapses under the weight of silence. You can avoid discipline, but time will reveal the weakness you built into your character. Life has a way of forcing you to pay for avoidance, and the longer you put off the payment, the higher the interest. So when you avoid, you're not actually choosing safety. You're choosing a future collapse. You're guaranteeing that the problem will return stronger. And in the meantime, you're corroding your own soul with shame, resentment, and regret. That is how avoidance destroys you. It's slow, it's subtle, but it's relentless. The alternative is painful too, but it's a different kind of pain. It's the pain of facing what you fear. That pain is sharp, but it's temporary. It cuts you open, but it also heals you. Avoidance is the opposite. It feels painless now, but it leaves you bleeding internally for years. You have to decide which pain you're willing to carry, the pain of growth or the pain of regret. One transforms you, the other rots you from the inside out. The remarkable thing is that the moment you stop avoiding and finally face what you've been running from, the entire weight of avoidance collapses. Suddenly, the monster you built in your imagination shrinks. You realize it wasn't invincible, it wasn't impossible. And in that instant, you regain the respect you had been denying yourself. You may not succeed right away, you may stumble, but the simple fact that you stood and faced it restores a sense of power. That's the antidote to avoidance, action. Even a small step toward the thing you fear begins to unravel years of running. So you need to ask yourself, what am I avoiding right now? What truth am I pretending not to see? What responsibility have I left on the table? And if you're honest, you already know the answer. You don't need someone to tell you. The very thought that makes your stomach tighten, that's the thing. And if you don't face it, it will eat you alive. Avoidance feels safe, but it's poison. It keeps you small, it breeds regret, and it ensures that you'll never discover what you're capable of. The only way to break free is to turn around and face the thing you've been running from. That confrontation will terrify you, but it will also set you free. Because avoidance destroys slowly, but courage rebuilds instantly. Transformation is not a soft process, and anyone who tells you it is has never gone through it. Change is not about comfort, it's about tearing apart what you were so that something new can take its place. When you truly decide to change, you are essentially declaring war on the parts of yourself that have been holding you back, and war is never clean. It's messy, it's painful, and it shakes you to your core. That's why real transformation feels violent. It doesn't gently nudge you into a better version of yourself. It rips apart the illusions you've been hiding behind and forces you to confront everything you didn't want to see. When you decide to step into transformation, you're essentially killing off parts of your old identity. Think about that. The laziness, the excuses, the lies you've told yourself to stay comfortable, those things have to die. And death, even symbolic death, is never easy. It feels like losing something familiar, even if that thing was poisoning you. Your old patterns are like a toxic friend, destructive but familiar. Walking away from them feels like betrayal, but in reality, it's liberation. The pain you feel during transformation is the pain of shedding skin that has grown too tight. People want to believe that change is about adding new habits, new routines, or new knowledge, but that's only part of it. The deeper truth is that change requires destruction before it allows construction. You cannot build the new while clinging to the old. If you want strength, weakness has to go. If you want truth, lies have to burn. If you want freedom, chains have to be broken. And all of that hurts because it means tearing away pieces of yourself that you've relied on for years. That's why transformation feels violent. It is the tearing apart of a false identity so that a truer one can emerge. The violence of transformation isn't just internal. It shakes up your external world too. The people who are comfortable with your old self may resist your new self. Relationships might fall apart. Friendships that thrived on your weakness might wither when you start growing stronger. And that's another layer of pain. You're not just letting go of who you were, you're letting go of the people and environments that fed that version of you. It feels like loss, but it's necessary loss. You cannot step into who you're meant to be if you're surrounded by people who are invested in who you used to be. But here's the key. This violence, this tearing apart is not destruction for its own sake. It's purposeful destruction. It's like pruning a tree. You cut away the dead branches so that new life can grow. If you refuse the pruning, the tree becomes tangled, weak, and eventually dies. But if you endure the cutting, painful though it is, the tree becomes stronger, healthier, more fruitful. That's exactly what transformation does. It cuts away the dead weight in your soul. It hurts, but it's the only way forward. There's a reason ancient stories often describe transformation as death and rebirth. The phoenix doesn't gently adjust itself into a new bird. It burns in fire and rises from ashes. That's the image of transformation. Fire and ashes before wings. And you can't skip the fire. Everyone wants the wings without the burning, but it doesn't work that way. The old you has to burn so that the new you can fly. That's the violence of transformation. It also explains why so many people give up on change. They step into it, they feel the tearing, the breaking, the discomfort, and they think something is wrong. They think, if this hurts this much, it can't be right. But that's the lie. The pain doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're shedding. It means the old shell is cracking. If you quit in that moment, you retreat back into comfort, but you carry the shame of knowing you couldn't withstand the fire. If you endure, however, if you keep walking through the chaos, you emerge as something unrecognizable compared to what you were before. Stronger, clearer, more alive. The violent nature of transformation also teaches you humility. You realize how deeply your old patterns had control over you. You see the weight of your own self-deception. That humility is painful, but it's also freeing, because once you see it clearly, you can no longer be tricked by it. You've exposed the enemy inside yourself, and in doing so, you weaken it. That confrontation is terrifying, but it's also the beginning of true freedom. And here's the paradox. As violent as transformation feels in the moment, what comes out of it is peace. On the other side of the breaking is wholeness. On the other side of the fire is clarity. But you cannot bypass the pain to get there. You have to walk straight through it. That's why so few people experience real transformation. They dabble in change, they flirt with growth, but they don't surrender to the full violence of it. They want comfort and growth at the same time, and that combination doesn't exist. So you have to decide, will you endure the tearing, the burning, the breaking? Will you let parts of yourself die so that something new can live? Because that's the cost of transformation. It will shake you. It will feel like chaos. But if you stay with it, if you don't run, you will come out the other side as someone you barely recognize in the best way possible. Transformation is violent because it has to be. The lies in you won't leave quietly. The weakness won't walk away politely. They will fight to stay alive, and you have to fight harder to kill them. Only then, in the ruins of who you were, can you build the life you were meant to live. Courage is one of those qualities people admire from a distance but rarely practice up close, because it always demands more than you expect. And the strange thing about courage is that it doesn't usually arrive before you act. It comes as a result of acting. People wait around thinking they'll move forward once they feel courageous, but that's not how it works. The feeling of courage doesn't precede the action. The action creates the courage. You move forward even while you're shaking, and the very act of moving forward strengthens you. That's why courage multiplies. Each act of bravery lays the foundation for the next. When you confront fear once, you prove to yourself that you can. That proof stays with you like a seed planted deep in your soul. And the next time you're faced with something terrifying, that seed sprouts. You remember the time you stepped forward when everything in you wanted to run, and that memory whispers, you can do it again. Courage builds on itself. It compounds like interest. The more you invest in it, the more it grows, until one day the things that once paralyzed you now barely faze you. Think of it this way. Courage is a muscle. If you never use it, it stays weak. But if you train it, if you put it under pressure, it grows. And just like lifting weights, It's uncomfortable at first. The weight feels heavy, your arms shake, you want to quit. But every repetition makes you stronger. Avoiding the weight doesn't make you stronger. Picking it up again and again is what builds strength. Courage works the same way. You have to lift the fear. You have to carry the discomfort. And each time you do, the weight feels a little lighter the next time. There's also a contagious quality to courage. When you act bravely, not only do you strengthen yourself, but you give others permission to do the same. People are watching, even if you don't realize it. Your children, your friends, your colleagues, they notice when you step forward in the face of fear. Your courage gives them a model to imitate. And just as fear spreads like wildfire, so does bravery. One act of courage can ripple outward, inspiring countless others. That's how movements start, how lives change, how generations shift. One person decides not to run anymore, and suddenly others realize they don't have to either. But none of that happens without the first act. That first step is always the hardest because it feels like you're moving without evidence. You don't yet have the memory of surviving. You don't yet know what it feels like to be stronger. You're stepping into the dark. And that's why the first act of courage feels the most terrifying. But it's also the most powerful because it cracks open the door to a new identity. It proves that fear is not an unbreakable wall. It's just a door waiting to be pushed open. And here's the paradox. Even when you act with fear in your chest, trembling in your body, it still counts as courage. In fact, that's the purest form of courage, acting despite fear, not in the absence of it. People think they need to eliminate fear before they move, but courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. And when you make that decision once, it becomes easier to make it again. That's the multiplying effect. One courageous choice strengthens the muscle for the next, and before long, you're living a life that fear no longer controls. Over time, this repetition of action changes the very structure of your mind. Fear no longer registers as a signal to run. It becomes a signal to step forward. The body that once froze at discomfort begins to associate discomfort with growth, and that is the true transformation. You don't just become capable of facing challenges. You begin to seek them out because you know they will make you stronger. That shift is what separates the people who grow from the people who stagnate. The ones who stagnate are always waiting for courage to arrive first. The ones who grow act first and let courage catch up. And there's something profoundly dignified in this process. You can look at yourself in the mirror differently when you know you faced what scared you. You can respect yourself in a way that no praise from others could ever give you, because courage isn't about what other people see. It's about the silent victories you win against your own fear. Those victories are invisible to the world, but they are unforgettable to you. And they stack one on top of another until your life is defined by bravery rather than avoidance. The opposite is also true. Every time you avoid, you weaken the muscle. You confirm to yourself that fear is stronger than you. And over time, that belief chains you until you can't even imagine another way of living. That's the slow erosion of the soul. But the moment you act, really act, you break the cycle. Even one courageous act can undo years of avoidance because it shatters the illusion that you're powerless. It reminds you that fear is not in control. You are. So courage multiplies through action. It grows every time you face the thing you thought you couldn't face. It compounds with every decision to move forward, even while afraid. And eventually, it becomes who you are. That's the gift of courage. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes what you believe about yourself. And once you believe you are capable of courage, there's very little in life that can stop you.